Good morning and welcome to the latest Membership on Track session, which forms part of our Member Systems, Processes and Data Month. My name is Richard Gott, I'm the chair of the network, and I am joining you from snowy SW19 this morning. So today's session, the title is Kickstart 2021 by placing members at the heart of your digital transformation. And the session today is sponsored by MemberWise recognised supplier ProTech. So if this is one of the first sessions that you've attended, you should see a small image of myself and you'll see the slides on your screen. If you want to increase the volume or if you want to expand the slides, you can do so with the icons that are just there below. You can also chat as we go along. You should see that on the right-hand side of your screen. So as we go through today's session, if you've got any questions or any queries, or if you'd like to make any comments, please do use the conversation function. The slides today will be circulated by our colleagues at ProTech, so there's no need to write anything down. And also the content will be made available on demand so that you can rewind, you can watch this in your own time. So in terms of today's learning outcomes, I'll just walk you through those before I introduce our speaker for today. The first learning outcome is understand key areas of focus and recognise common pain points of a digital transformation process. Learn the importance of organisational development in placing members at the heart of your planning. Develop actionable strategies that deliver the improvements in experience and value your members deserve, and I would say expect as well at the present moment in time. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Steve Shields, who is the Head of Sales and Marketing at ProTech. Morning, Steve, are you there?
Good morning, Rich.
Morning, Steve. I understand you've not got as much snow as us in London.
No, we're in a distinctly non-snowy Birmingham at the moment.
Okay, well, without further ado, Steve, I'll hand over to you, and I know you're going to obviously share your slides.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to ProTech's presentation this morning on kickstarting 2021 by placing members at the heart of your digital transformation. What we want to do in today's session is ensure that we understand what members want and make sure that we place that at the heart of the digital transformation strategy that you may be about to embark on. I'm Stephen Shields and I'm Head of Sales and Marketing at ProTech Computer Systems. So in terms of today's agenda, we first want to take a look at quantifying organisational change. When we are approached by organisations or perhaps existing customers, are often faced with organisations that maybe want a digital transformation or want to invoke some form of organisational change. And we're going to take some time looking at why those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. We're then going to look at planning for success and how we can build members and members' wants truly into that picture. We're going to share our experiences on selecting the right partner. Of course, we are a technology provider and we see procurements from the other side of the fence, and we want to take a look at what works for us and maybe for other partners out there. We're going to touch on project approach and implementation styles and have a look at how that may be getting the right approach for your member base. And finally, we'll finish the session on why you should kickstart 2021 with your digital transformation. So let's firstly take a look at organisational change. When we are approached by organisations, we tend to find that organisations are embarking on a digital transformation. And we want to take a look at, say, what the dictionary definition of digital transformation is. So as we have on screen here, digital transformation is the integration of digital technology into all areas of the business, fundamentally changing how you operate and deliver value to the customer. Now, this is an interesting one. Quite often, digital transformation can actually be taken as being a delivery of tech in order to give what members want. That the perception is that if we improve our tech, we'll improve our shop window, we'll improve what we're giving to customers, more data, more intelligence, and therefore we'll improve as a business. But actually, if we go on to read the second part of this particular slide, digital transformation also touches on a change in culture. So cultural change that requires organisations to continually challenge their status quo, experiment, and get comfortable with that. So ultimately, digital transformation leads not only to the increase of tech, but also needs to take an inward view on what your organisation is doing and what that organisation is all about in order to deliver what your members actually want. So what is organisational transformation? Organisational transformation is a process designed to create significant change in the culture and work process of an organisation and produce significant improvement in performance. So quite often what we tend to see is that actually organisational transfer is a perceived byproduct of the digital process. If new tech is brought into the business, by definition that tech is newer, it's more technology savvy, it will give us more things in our toolbox, it will speed up how we do things, give us more intelligence, more reporting, we'll know more about our members and we'll be able to better serve them. But actually, it's not linear. Those tools that are out there will of course do those things, but it's really important also to look at how your organisation works, how your organisation braces technology and the culture, and have a look at what members actually want from their membership and make sure that you are delivering on that in a technology savvy way. So ultimately, what that means in summary is that a digital transformation process starts with organisational change at the top. So I just want to spend a few moments now just delving a little bit further into how we approach organisational change. This slide is one that is quite commonly used. I've seen this in presentations myself, but it is quite important. Over time, customer demand and expectations for the right products delivered in the right way with the right technology are ever increasing. We've done presentations in the past on Generation Z and what that changing landscape means. But at the same time, there are ever increasing pressures on income and investment and what that means for able to move forward. And that creates an issue for organisations. Maybe have less staff, less money to spend, but ultimately our customers want more and we need to move forward with our tech. That is never more so true at the moment with the current situation. I know that many organisations in the market are being very badly affected in terms of maybe not being able to put exams on or deliver seminars in the same way, and that's having a massive impact on revenues generated in the sector, and those customer demands don't stop. If anything, that is growing. We're seeing a big influx of redundancies out there in the market, people looking to change jobs or protect their position through greater learning, but that requires ever greater need for tech and to be able to deliver that online. So I think this slide is ever more true at the moment. And there is a tendency to believe that creating efficiency within a business is what will ultimately help drive that organisational change, which will create the capacity in order to perform your digital transformation. However, efficiency isn't necessarily the whole story. What we need to look at, are we actually serving your members in the way that the member wants to be served? Because if you're performing tasks that are by definition what the member doesn't want, then that is creating a resource drain on your organisation, and no amount of digital transformation at the front end is necessarily going to prevent that efficiency drain that you're getting in your processes. So how do we truly begin looking at that process? where do we start? The key is understanding what matters to your customers and drive an understanding of your purpose as an organisation. Now, that may seem quite obvious. Of course, we know what our members want. They're a member of our organisation and they want to attend webinars or do our qualifications or whatever it may be. But the key question here is, do you truly understand what your members want? I was involved with an exercise with a particular organisation last year where we asked this particular question, followed that up with, how often do you survey your members? How often do you actually ring members? Or as that piece of demand comes into your business to perform an action, do you step back and say, are we delivering what you want as a customer? And it really made that particular organisation sit back and say, we think we know what our customers want, but actually when we step back from the day-to-day and all of the organisational inefficiencies that we have, that may not be the case. And there may be very small products and services in our overall armoury of member value proposition that are actually of greater importance to the member, and we just don't know what those are. By understanding what those are, then at that point, you can start to drive organisational change processes, the outward facing digital product towards what those members ultimately want. So by understanding what your members want, you can make improvements in the time spent serving them on those things and not what we call power demand. That will ultimately cost the business less and will drive up the perception of quality with those members. By doing those three things, it will create capacity and generate the space to work on true organisational change, driving fairer demand out of your processes and moving towards a truly wholly rounded digital transformation. So I'm now going to move on to my next slide, and we're going to spend probably the next 6 or 7 minutes of the presentation just looking at various studies that Protech have done in conjunction with our customer base to understand what members may want from your organisation. And this takes the form of various quotes. We're going to be playing a video in a few moments' time of real life member experiences, and then we'll move on to the next stage. So in front of us here, we have the results of a survey that we did in conjunction with a large membership organisation, looking at a quick question as people were ringing into the organisation with what is ultimately fairer demand, tasks that they couldn't complete elsewhere, so they brought that into the central organisation. As part of that process, the operator asked the member what they want from their membership, and these were some of the things that came out of that. So coaching was one of the points there, increased networking capability, we've got access to training, high quality training and development, so accreditation pathways, continuing professional development, soft skill courses. So lots of real practical support centered around their professionalization. And by understanding these things, these start to create the business case for what that digital transformation should ultimately be looking like. We should be maximizing the member value proposition on those learning related products and services, and the underlying tech and the underlying processes serve those as seamlessly as possible. And by understanding that, as we move towards what does our digital transformation actually look like, by ensuring we're putting those at the heart of this transformation and not as a byproduct of new tech, that means that we are ensuring that members will get what they want. We also run a survey ourselves, looking at what this particular survey was done in conjunction with a series of professional bodies. We were asking their members of staff what they perceived that reason for joining was. And overwhelmingly, 45% felt that career development was the key reason why members would join the organisation, with large chunks looking at networking and membership. And finally, just to finish off on those polls, we extrapolated out that professional development, career development, to have a look at actually, has digital transformations created an improvement in the overall CPD position? If our members are saying that they want professionalisation, and our members of staff believe that organisation or the members themselves want professionalisation, are we delivering on that via CPD? And overwhelmingly, the answer to that is actually not. And that suggests that by not looking at what members want, digital transformations are maybe improving the overall tech status, they're not necessarily hitting the point in terms of, are we improving our professional development technologies? So I'm now going to show a short video with some real life examples of members and their perceptions.
So when thinking about my industry, yes, I am aware of the professional membership body which serves it, though to be honest, I don't know a lot about it. I looked at it initially very early on in my career and I haven't revisited it much since. It's a strange one, but for me, in the position that I'm in within my company, I don't know how it would help me to progress further. Although I do see there may be benefits, obviously, if I was to look to move current roles, or particularly if I was to go and work internationally or abroad, then it might be something I'd be more inclined to look at. I guess probably the main reason, therefore, why I haven't joined is there hasn't been a need. I've managed to progress in my career so far without it. However, if it did. So when thinking about my industry, yes, I am aware of the professional membership body which serves it, though to be honest, I don't know a lot about it. I looked at it initially very early on in my career and I haven't revisited it much since. It's a strange one, but for me, in the position that I'm in within my company, I don't know how it would help me to progress further. Although I do see there may be benefits, obviously, if I was to look to move current roles, or particularly if I was to go and work internationally or abroad, then it might be something I'd be more inclined to look at. I guess probably the main reason, therefore, why I haven't joined is there hasn't been a need. I've managed to progress in my career so far without it. However, if it did.
Okay, we're going to leave the video there as it seems to be stalling at a particular point. So I'm going to move into my next slide now. So yeah, really just to summarize there what the video would have shown us, we've got a mixture of non-members and members and their perception of whether they would renew their membership and what that would take to do so. So Kerry there was just explaining as a non-member why she hasn't joined the professional body in her particular sphere of the world. And really the essence of the videos there is not necessarily what's important. You know, the message that was going to come across from those videos was a deeper message around professionalisation, but ultimately it's that surveying of individuals, knowing what they're looking for and using that to drive towards real organisational change, and therefore ensuring that you're getting the correct ecosystem of technology solutions in your overall digital transformation. So I'm going to spend a few minutes now looking at change management and how we actually deliver on those things that members want, how we adapt our organisations in order to deliver on that. So I've got a slide in front of me here which lays out that change management is not just technology, it's a mixture of process, people and technology that helped deliver that change. That may be obvious in some cases, but quite often technology is a leading driver towards, we feel we're outdated, we feel we're not delivering on those member benefits, and therefore we're going to change our tech in order to make that right. But I do want to say today that actually looking at the underlying processes that serve what members want, plus how people respond to those requests, are an important part of your organisational change and therefore the digital transformation process. So how practically do we deliver on that change? It's all well and good saying that people, process and technology combine to create good tech, good process, good operations, but that's not the whole story. So I just wanted to share today a 5-step plan of how we get to the point of ensuring that we've delivered on that organisational change and we are delivering what members want. So first and foremost, review your organisation's purpose, vision and mission. What is that perceived reason for being? And I'm sure that anybody in the audience, if you go onto your website, you will have an About Us page which lays this out. And certainly from a technology provider perspective, that information is really key when we meet a new organisation. It's as soon as we start speaking to an organisation, we go and read that and we understand what is that sanitised view of what the organisation is trying to do. And we ultimately try and embed that and that thinking into the process that we go through to onboard technology. If we're not in some way lining up with that purpose, vision and mission, then we as technologists are doing something wrong. And by truly understanding that, it gives a paradigm through which you can start to understand whether the reasons for the digital transformations, the outcomes for the project are truly aligned with that purpose. So once we understand what purpose, vision and mission looks like, then we come on to review the current value proposition, and that is the products and services that you offer to the market. Now, the way to do this is quite simply get on a whiteboard and start writing down all the products, the services, the offers, the reasons that people come to the organisation on a day-to-day basis. It's the brainstorming exercise and get that all out on page. And then go and gain that feedback, as we've alluded to today. Understand whether the perception of the value proposition has been written down at stage 2 is in line with the value proposition that industry experts or current members, current non-members have of your organisation, and that does create some really interesting results actually, and it shows that there can potentially be a misalignment between value proposition and ultimately what those prospective and current members want from your organisation. And what that gives is a truer version of your actual value proposition. Cross-references what's good about the organisation, what's bad about the organisation, what members want, and you can safely say, yes, we've got our value proposition, and now we can start looking at how we're going to change how the business operates on a day-to-day perspective, how the business or the technology needs to change in order to service that value proposition that you have sanity checked. In terms of the review of those processes, then you get into a series of tasks where you start to look at, okay, is the value or is the demand that's coming into the organisation truly working towards that value proposition, or is the demand that's coming in from members, I can't do X, I'd like to do Y, I'm struggling to do Z, whatever those may be. If that's not aligned with the value proposition, then we need to take that out of the business via people, via process, or via technology, so that we know exactly what good process looks like. And then you have your value proposition, your processes, and you can start to look at, okay, now where do we start to build technology on top of that in order to deliver a truly world-class member value proposition our members. So it's a very quick overview there of a change management lean process. ProTech do have a dedicated product in our overall proposition, product Lean 3S, which is a program that we can take organizations through on these 5 steps, a set of tools and a framework that empowers your staff to deliver on that organisational change and empowers them to come up with real and practical ways of changing ways of working that are centred around the value proposition. So now we've got to the stage where we understand what our value proposition looks like, and we are delivering on organisational change, and now we want to start planning for success from a tech perspective. So I just want to spend a few moments just sharing our best practices on how we believe that should be completed from our perspective of a provider in the sector. We see some very good ways of delivering on digital transformations, but we also see some projects that maybe don't follow some of the things that I'm about to share, and that likely will lead to less successful digital transformation projects. So it may feel fairly obvious, but key to delivering on a successful digital transformation is to ensure that you have a defined business case. That may feel fairly obvious, but actually, especially in the COVID, post-COVID world, we are seeing this not happen quite so much, actually. Organisations who realise that there is an increased need for digitalisation because of the situation that we all find ourselves in, and maybe don't have the cash available to spend on tech, are perhaps shortcutting this stage somewhat. And whilst that creates a quicker route to market, it delivers quicker change, the likelihood is that there is a ticking time bomb there, where actually the tech that's been bought now to get over tactical hurdles and to keep delivering on the business may not be a long-term fix. And similarly, project may be entered into for not necessarily the right reasons, and they may not be objective in the reason for doing so. So understanding what the objectives are for the project, how they link to that overall business strategy, making sure that digital transformation is done for the right reasons, against good, solid process, and the likely return on investment in doing so is really important there. And I completely get why that speed up may be happening and why that the process may not be followed, but really just wanted to give an air of caution from the supplier side that yes, that there is a little bit of a shortcutting here that says we need to get to B pretty quickly, and therefore these things aren't being tracked as wholly as they may have been even 18 months ago. So then we get into, in terms of business case, review of options. So there are different solutions out there, and some will be right and some will be wrong for the digital transformation. But understanding what you're aiming to do, as I've spoken about in the first part of today's presentation, will lead you to a more clearer and concise understanding of what those options are and which one's the right one for you as an organisation. Okay, so the slide there also goes on to discuss looking at costs and the different options. Quite often we see people looking at different price tiers, have a real clear view of timescales and how long it's going to take to implement a digital transformation, and make sure that this is written down and quantified so you can look back later on in the project and make sure that those costs and timescales are truly being delivered on. there is an element of, if that doesn't happen and if the process is relatively unstructured, that costs and timescales are going to elongate at a later date, and therefore understanding and having a clear picture of how that is expected to play out is quite important. And risk is really important for us as a technology provider. Understanding what those risks may be upfront through your process and finding a shared understanding with a provider of those risks so that you can mitigate them is really important in moving on a project. Once the business case has been developed, then we move into developing business requirements. And as an individual who worked in procurement processes quite a bit, we see all sorts of ways in which those business requirements are developed. From a very unstructured, we've got some very high level things that we'd like to do. We want to new members, we want to be able to join online, but basically we want new tech, right down to very low level, hundreds and hundreds of very minute requirements tends to be one approach or the other. What we really wanted to share from the supplier side today is how to get coherence in those requirements. So it's really important to start looking at user personas. So who are all of the people internally and externally that are the tech will deliver for? Those are the people that you'll have surveyed, that the member value proposition is built around. And in looking at those personas, it means you won't miss or omit key people from your processes. And quite often, if that doesn't happen, there can be a leaning towards making sure what we do for the members, or making sure that we deliver on a system that is good for the internal use of the system in an organisational change context, but understanding who all of those personas are, getting under the skin of those personas, and then laying out all of the things that those people would like to do and why, gives you a breadth to what your member value proposition is all about. That gives what we call a set of user stories, and those should be technology agnostic, not talking in we want the system to do X in order to achieve Y, and that gives the technologists an opportunity to then go and solutionize how those user stories will be met by the software and the tech that will be delivered. Okay, so I'm now going to share a perspective on selecting the right partner. So again, I'm coming at this from what, as a technology provider, would we like to see when we're talking to organisations? What is it that we're aiming to do in order to make sure that we are the right partner for those organisations, and therefore, if you've got that in mind, it helps technologists to work with you to make sure that we are the right fit or we aren't the right fit. And that is really important, actually, from the technology provider perspective. We do get that sometimes we won't be the right fit for organisations, and that's fine if that's the case. But there's certain things that we would like to do in order to try and work that through and make sure we get to the right place. So we are more than happy, certainly for organisations to approach our client base and understand more about us before we're approached. It's really important to get that view beforehand of what an organisation is like and that level of fit. Organisations such as MemberWise, it's a great resource for finding the right organisation for that process, finding the right organisations for your value proposition and the digital transformation that you're embarking on. Requesting a product demonstration, really important. It's the first step on the road to point 2. As a technology provider, what we're looking at those product demonstrations as is not necessarily an opportunity to show what our software is all about and how it's going to deliver tech, but to understand whether those sessions start to drive towards the right partnership. And I'd really say asking questions throughout those demonstrations and really search and put the potential provider under a bit of stress, I guess, to understand whether they can truly deliver on your requirements at that stage is really important, because what that does is it invokes conversation. It starts to build that relationship. And if you know that you've got that two-way understanding of requirements starting to take place, then chances are those longer term relationships will start to evolve. But long-term relationships is really important from a technology perspective. Typically where projects don't tend to work as well is where the technology is provided and then the provider drops off and you're left with tech. That tech hasn't necessarily been aligned to the value proposition that I spoke about earlier, and therefore you have good tech, but the underlying value proposition is not being met. The waste work still exists within the business, and your digital transformation has got some way, but not all the way to delivering what members will need. From a provider perspective, we do like to challenge in those processes. So understanding what your value proposition about, making sure that we're selling the tech to that value proposition is what we will be aiming to do. So it's not necessarily a case of us saying, yeah, we can deliver on all of these requirements. Yes, yes, yes. The actual answer here is actually no, I think this requirement is going to be quite difficult. I'm not quite sure why that requirement exists. And if you do that in another way, then that's going to deliver this for your members. And actually looking at your mission and your vision, your organisation seems to be about X, but the requirements here that we've been given are actually more about Y. And we want to follow up on why that is. And asking those sorts of questions for us as a technology provider are a really important way of reassuring ourselves that we are helping to deliver on that true member value proposition. And then finally, revisit your approach. So revisit the business case, the objectives, and make sure that the process that you're following is lining up with those always, to make sure that you are getting the partner that's going to deliver those for you. We won't have time in the session to demonstrate this particular video, but this will be included in the slides as we send them out. It's a great resource from Emma Dawkins of NC UK, a leading awarding body and digital transformation expert. It's a great 6-minute resource for how Emma has delivered on digital transformations previously. So really recommend going and watching that video. It's just a good sanitized version of the approach to get to the right provider and the right actually delivering success for the organisation. So I now want to move on to discuss a little bit about project approach. Us technologists will talk about project management styles and timescales, and it can all get a little bit confusing. So I just wanted to cut through there and talk about why we do that. So first and foremost, I just wanted to talk about evolution versus revolution in digital transformation. There's no one correct answer here, but typically what we tend to see is that organisations are strained towards the revolution side of things. We have tech that doesn't deliver what we need. We need to rip out that central solution and replace it and get new tech in place, and then we can start to move forward. But actually, if that revolution process is not delivering on that statement of what members want, then that can take 6-9 months to get that embedded before you start moving towards a more evolution state. So actually, it may be the case that evolution is better there, and almost working around the edges, understanding what that value proposition is, what members want, designing your processes around those, getting to that point, and then looking at the ecosystem of tech that you'll need to deliver on that may then lead to the perspective that actually we can evolve our tech around the edges of the core solutions, start delivering on those benefits to members, and then look backwards towards how do we join these things together. And so rather than starting in the middle and working outwards, starting on the outside and working inwards, may outwardly start to improve that perception of quality, start generating that capacity because members are getting what they want, and then you can start to bring those together into a seamless, technology savvy member value proposition. So for any project managers in the room, we're well aware of Waterfall projects and Agile projects. Certainly I've seen a transition in my 10 years in the market from Waterfall always to Agile being the vogue way of delivering projects. And it's quite interesting actually, because Waterfall would imply a more revolutionary way of working and Agile a more evolutionary way of working. But quite often we still see that ultimately the projects that people want to embark on are quite revolutionary, as I've just stated, but the way in which trying to get there is Agile. It's vogue, it's how projects are delivered, small steps, small evolutions to deliver on the project, and de-risk doing lots of work and it being out of date. But that does then create a more a paradigm there of, is there a mismatch between project management styles and ultimately what organisations are trying to deliver on? So just to step back there and explain the difference for anybody that isn't wholly aware, as we have in the bottom of the slide here, Waterfall is very sequential. It's delivering on a whole project, so going through stages in a linear way to result in a project being delivered. Whereas Agile is much more iterative, it's defining a product backlog, it's organising that into small chunks of work, working on those until they're delivering in a circular motion to make sure that it's right, deploying that piece of work and then moving on to the next stage of backlog if you run a project. By definition, it's small steps to achieve a bigger overall objective, whereas Waterfall is very defined entrance and exit points from each stage of a project in order to deliver on a whole. So just wanted to delve into that a little bit deeper. The pros of a waterfall style approach is that it uses a clear structure. You have very defined milestones on which things will be delivered, and you can manage your project along those. It's easy to deliver project success in terms of measuring success. Yes, we have done all of these things, tick, tick, and we can now move into the next stage. It's very easy to set an expectation of a longer term project. We've got each of these different milestones that will run down the project, and when we complete all of those, our project will be completed. And it's allied to extensive documentation, so you can very easily audit that the process has been followed and it works to a defined scope. So we know exactly what we're going to deliver and we're going to work through those steps to do that. The cons of that approach are that it can take a long time to define requirements. There's a risk around communication, so you may have gone off into a stage and that's been worked through, but if there are risks in that particular phase that haven't been clearly communicated, then all of the other milestones that follow on from that are going to potentially go right, as it were. It creates a problem around change control, so you set your scope up front, but now tech needs to do something else, and therefore we need to revisit that, and that will have implications for the overall timeline, and therefore the waterfall approach can lack some flexibility. And finally, it means that testing of tech quite far away from the start of the project, and therefore the needs of the business, the needs of the members may have changed over the time it's taken to get through those milestones, and therefore testing can be risky because a scope that may now be out of date ultimately. By comparison, Agile. The pros of Agile are that deployment time can be cut. That is deployment time of smaller elements of a project. So delivering on a piece of tech and then moving on to the next piece of tech. But as stated earlier, in that revolutionary world where you've got a bigger project, by delivering on those small pieces of tech, if they're not ultimately going live or delivering the member value proposition, whilst it may look like small incremental steps practically within a project, you're still ultimately working towards a more waterfall approach. Where Agile is really great is that it works well with issue resolution. So by biting off smaller chunks of scope, everybody's working towards the same bit very quickly after the scope has been laid down, and therefore you can pick up on issues, resolve them in the moment, carry on with that work, and bring that portion of the work to its conclusion. Similarly, by biting off smaller chunks of work within the project, it reduces risk by definition. Ultimately, it means people are working towards the same goal, and that introduces less risk into the process. It also means that there's more flexibility. So small scope, small product backlog, iterative changes to that to deliver on the results in a more flexible time frame. So if that's going to take a little bit longer, it will extend the overall project a little bit, but we're delivering it there and then and making sure that that fits the needs of ultimately the customer, but the member as well. And the idea is then that Agile is ultimately a more collaborative process as well. The cons of Agile, by the same token, are potentially a lack of documentation. So Agile is designed to be much more freeform, working towards a looser scope and delivering on the correct tech. But ultimately, that creates the potential for elongation. Actually, it needs to do this, and it needs to do this, and it needs to do this, and delivering on that will take time, elongate timescales, and can sometimes feel like Kelly against a wall because the requirement is moving. So in using the Agile approach, acceptance management is absolutely vital. Understanding what it is that we're aiming to achieve with that bit of tech, aligning that to the member value proposition and having that quantifiable gives an outcome to that Agile approach. Similarly, Agile, it can be difficult to measure project progress. You've got a product backlog, you're working through that product backlog, but if one item is taking much longer and the other items are not yet started, it can feel like things are moving out to the right. There is a need for a higher level of time and interaction in an Agile process, so that can bring the cost of the project up in order to get the right result. And the byproduct that is timescales elongating and costs spiraling out of control. So whilst it's designed to be quicker and delivering on what members want that much more quickly, if that acceptance management isn't robust and the project is elongating, then time and cost will go to the right as well. So I'm going to finish off on this section as to the sorts of individuals that you should be thinking about to deliver on the tech that you're putting forward. Now, this is, of course, not always possible. There's various different sizes of organisation in the market. But having an understanding of these roles is really important towards the successful delivery of your digital transformation. So having a single technology change project manager in some shape or form is really important. That person there is ultimately responsible for the delivery of the project. It kind of goes without saying, but where that is done by committee, that can potentially get a little bit more difficult. So having an individual who's responsible for making decisions there is really quite vital. Having a defined business analyst or subject matter expert in various different areas of the business is really important. And what we actually tend to find is that quite often the best people for that particular job are the people that are enacting those processes. they know them better than anybody else. They know all of the quirks of those processes and help to deliver a real accurate digital transformation. In terms of delivering member portals or full website digital transformations, it's really important to have a single point of contact, what we would call a web product owner there, that has a clear understanding of the vision and what we're ultimately aiming for and control acceptance around that. Actually delivering up what members want from a shop front can be quite an emotionally charged process, and everybody's got a different opinion on how that tech should look, how it should work, how it should behave, how intuitive that is from a user experience perspective. And that in of itself can create friction between supplier and organisation, but also internally within the organisation where there are differing views of what good looks like there. So by having a product owner who knows A, what to deliver on to deliver the most value proposition as soon as possible, and B, what that looks like and gain that consensus, and then help to deliver on that consensus. Similarly, this may fall into the same person, but having somebody has a clear understanding of content and how the journey is going to be signposted for the member, making sure that the content on a website or a portal or an app is organised in such a way that it is personalised and relevant and delivers what the member wants, is a really important part of driving the most you can possibly get out of that tech that you're ultimately deploying. And then finally, having a project support officer who's in place for governance and communication with a wider team. Should the team be suitable enough size to have a wider team, is really important. Making sure that you've got that investment from the wider organisation is really important on delivering on that benefit. If you've got good tech and good digital transformation going on and it is aligned to your member value proposition, but your internal staff base is not aligned with that, then ultimately that digital transformation will fail. So communication and managing that change really is key. And a good technology provider will bring the following 4 individuals or teams to the table. So a project manager, and that role is really designed to keep the project on track, of course, but also to manage risk through the process and be able to develop issues as they're arising and manage those through with a key contact on the organisation side of the fence. Really quite important. Having a central lead architect who understands the overall project backlog of what you're trying to achieve will keep you strategically in the right place. If that is potentially somebody that's part of the technical team and not a lead architect, then you've got potentially different people delivering on different requirements and they may not necessarily join together. So having that technical mindset, working alongside a CRM and digital consultant who understands the business context and on the ground what your members want is really crucial to delivering on a project successfully. So finally, I'm going to have a look at why you should kickstart your digital transformation now. So at the moment, what we're seeing is that there is an economic opportunity here. We know, unfortunately, that the scenario and the situation we've all found ourselves in over the last year or so is having a tumultuous impact on the overall workforce across the country. And what that means is that people are retraining, they are looking to professional bodies to perhaps protect and professionalise it at this moment in time. There's some great statistics out there about the amount of people that are looking to change job role at the moment or looking to retrain, and that creates an opportunity for our market, which is the positive thing. And therefore ensuring that right now your tech and your processes are delivering on what members want is really quite important. And therefore, by not acting now, it may be an opportunity missed to grow members, to retain members, because ultimately they're not getting from the organisation what they perceive they should be getting. So you want to equip your organisation to help those members at this point in time. So a digital transformation, as we've discussed today, will help support us through that. It's fairly clear to say that the NFP market is changing at the moment. We saw a similar thing 10 years or so ago as we came out at the back of the 2008 financial crisis. Certainly when I entered the market back in 2010, there was a real shift towards CRM and away from membership management solutions. And that process has evolved over the last 10 years or so, but that is changing the game once more. And what we're seeing now is that an ecosystem of solutions is really coming to the fore, and that's been evolving for the last few years, but certainly the last year or so has accelerated that. So no longer are CRM and member engagement be all and end all of delivering on that member value proposition. It's the tools that you have in your armory and how those link together, which is becoming vogue in all of the procurement and the organisations that we deal with. And it's of course ever harder to serve those members. So going back to the first point around the economic situation, we are seeing organisations that have unfortunately had to furlough people or make redundancies to overcome the current situation. Of course, that makes it harder to serve members. But by looking at the waste work in the business, looking at whether those members of staff were truly delivering on member benefits, or whether they were supporting demand because the member couldn't get what they want, is the key to unlocking that capacity that may have been there before, certainly isn't now, and a reframe to say, right, let's make sure that we're doing this correctly. Will create that space to serve your members in a better way. So that brings me to the end of the session today. I just have on screen here some useful resources from ProTech Computer Systems. So please do visit our YouTube channel. Our LinkedIn page has regular updates and snippets of advice that we hope you'll find useful. And then finally on our website, we have a member value toolkit, which gives a greater degree of information on how to help manage your members. So thanks again to Rich for giving us the opportunity to present today, and I hope everyone's found it useful.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. So obviously, thank you for presenting that. There's a lot of food for thought there for people who've joined us today. And I mean, I think it was incredible about certainly one of the early things that you talked about was the fact that 80% of professional bodies had not got the right CPD related infrastructure in place. So I think there's potential implications there if that's not corrected, I'd say, over the next couple of years. Did that result surprise you?
Yeah, I'm not sure it did, actually. And I think that comes back to the essence of delivering on the correct digital transformation for members. That if there's a perceived view of what members want, greater personalisation, maybe more self-service, etc., that those things may be missing the point, actually. And if members are looking to professionalise and want real practical help, then that should be at the heart of the digital transformation. And of course, personalisation and all of those things that I just mentioned are vitally important to an efficient operation, but potentially in terms of project approach, timescales, and how that's organised, you can get on with the former in order to create the space to do the latter. And it is a bit of a paradigm shift, but coming back to my final point around integrations becoming vogue, again, that seems to be a lead into, okay, we can bring these solutions together to deliver that value proposition, and it changes the emphasis of what digital transformation has been in the market.
That makes sense. And then, and just finally, just before we finish today, because I'm conscious that we've obviously had our hour, you know, when it comes to seeing digital transformation over the past year or so with the whole COVID situation, do you get a feeling that the membership sector's fast forwarded possibly? I mean, I know I've been banding around a figure of maybe for some organisations they've speeded up by maybe 5 years, but what's your general feeling? Do you think it's speeded up, or do you think some of it's slowed down?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think there was a very tactical need to speed up in the middle of last year. I think the dust will settle on that, and there's going to be some questions at this stage. Certainly, ProTech work in both the professional body space and the awarding body space. There's been a huge speeding up in the awarding arena. Certainly, the qualification portions of professional bodies are moving ahead at rates of knots. The membership sort of arena maybe less so in comparison, which is where my original answer was going to be. It hasn't been that much of a speed up, but certainly there has been I think initially there was a bit of a gap that was created by not being able to serve members quite as much as used to, which had created this outward look into new tech, coupled with that tactical, we need to do stuff now. And now I feel like there's a little bit more of a pause to say, okay, right, what are we actually doing here, and how do we bring that together into a coherent digital transformation? And ultimately, by definition, it means the member value proposition has changed. The way that members want to interact with organisations have changed over the year. So it does feel like the cards have been thrown up in the air a little bit, and they're going to come back down and need to be reorganised into coherent process digital transformation strategy.
Okay, so basically we're going to have to take a little bit more of an informed and more strategic approach over the coming months and years. So what I'll do. So in terms of today, obviously, thank you very much, Steve, for presenting your session. And as we said at the beginning today, ProTech will be circulating the slides to everybody that's registered for today's session. And equally, the content that has been presented today will be making it available on demand, so you can watch it in your own time. So I'll wrap up there, Steve. So thank you again for speaking today. Thank you for your support. We couldn't do these sessions without you. And obviously to our viewers, you know, keep logging into these sessions. We've got quite a few more of them to go on this really critical topic, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.